Chapter 74. Out in the wilds, rioting at the Shady Inn. The store owner was taken aback. Huh? That one? Daosheng, are you sure that's what you want? Yes, that one, Shilian definitively confirmed. With that, he simply rushed up and grabbed the rope himself. He then picked up Huacheng, dashed to the back of the store, and slipped behind a set of curtains. This clothing store was a daring one, and innovative at that. There was a small stall inside for fitting, so those who came to purchase clothes could try them on right there. The crowd was bewildered at the ruckus. Moments later, a magnificently dressed cultivator walked past the clothing store, grumbling as he rubbed at his forehead. Behind him followed a mob of strange and fierce-looking monks and cultivators. When he saw the large crowd gathered at the clothing store, he barked, displeased. What are you looking at? Forget it, let's hurry, I need to go to the toilet again. Wait, heavens Aischung, there are plenty of people here. Why not ask if they saw them? My lady benefactors, have you seen a white-clad cultivator pass by, accompanied by a small child covered in bandages? The crowd of customers said nothing, but there were some who unconsciously glanced at the back of the store. The chasing mob grew cautious, and they made silent gestures at the other, indicating that they should go inside to investigate. Heaven's Eye strode inside, and slowly approached the curtains, holding his breath. A moment later, he yanked them open, which prompted a shriek from inside. Behind the curtains there sat a woman. Her long, raven-black hair was twisted up in a loose bun, and her slender white neck was decorated by a black choker and a thin silver chain. She had pulled down a small part of her shirt, which revealed her snow-white shoulder and nearly half of her back. It looked as if the robe was about to fall, and the sight made one's face burn and heart ache. After Heaven's Eye yanked back the curtain, the woman trembled and covered her face with her sleeves while whimpering softly, as if she was shocked and terrified by a sudden, brutish act. Heaven's Eye instantly dropped the curtains. I'm sorry! The band of monks and cultivators trailing behind Heaven's Eye screamed as well. What a sin! What a sin! They all covered their eyes. Using this chance, the woman whirled around. Who else could it be but Xilian? Huacheng was sitting in his arms and had been blocked from view by Xilian's body. While Xilia was a man and his shoulders were wider than the average woman's, he had achieved the perfect effect by only pulling down half of his clothing to expose the best ankle. With one handful of Huacheng, Xilian lifted his skirt with the other, and dashed like the wind past those screaming monks and cultivators once they'd covered their eyes. The store owner and lady customers were dumbfounded. Seeing him flee, the store owner initially wanted to stop him, but as he opened his mouth, he spotted the gold foil. It more than paid for 2 sets of clothing, and so he shut his mouth, shrugged, and stopped caring. Carrying Huacheng in his arms, Xilian dashed madly away, leaving nothing but dust behind him. Passerby on the streets stared with unbelieving eyes, but they only saw the blurred after-image of a woman holding a child, racing as lithe and ferocious as a jaguar. The clouds of suffocating dust stirred up in his wake left the crowds choking and coughing. A small food stall on the side of the road got covered in the stuff, and the owner started cussing. What's wrong with you? Xilian spared the time to turn his head and shout, Everything's wrong! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! He heard wild hollering from behind him. Stop right there! When he looked back, he saw the mob charging out of the clothing store. I have to wonder what's going through the heads of people who yell stop right there. It's obvious the one they're yelling at won't stop. They'll just hold their breath and run faster, Xilian thought, and he put those very thoughts into action, dashing away all the quicker. With such a large, roaring mob running down the street, more dust flew and choked the air. The food stall owner couldn't even curse anymore, and he flipped his own walk in anger. Why the fuck do I even bother? After keeping up the chase for 4 hours, the ceaselessly hollering monks and cultivators finally ran out of breath, and their steps slowed. Xilian was experienced in the art of escape, and he quietly persevered to the end. Once they had completely lost their pursuers, Xilian set Huacheng down and stepped to the side of the road, gasping for breath. Huacheng held his shoulders and said glumly, Don't breathe too harshly. Careful not to hurt yourself. Xilian looked up and saw Huacheng's tiny frown, but since his companion was still wearing the face of a child, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. He had laughed too abruptly. A sharp pain shot through his ribs, and he clutched his chest to seek relief. Seeing Huacheng's dismayed expression, he waved dismissively. It's nothing. Is that an inn over there? Sure enough, there was an inn not far ahead, its warm yellow glow peeping through the steadfast blues of the evening. It almost seemed like it was beckoning travelers. Xilian straightened up. Let's go in and rest. All right, Huacheng replied. Xilian grasped Huacheng's hand, and the two strolled toward the small building. When they arrived at the entrance, Xilian realized that this inn had 2 levels. It was much more lavish than it appeared from afar. The doors were closed, and Xilian raised his hand to give a light knock. Anyone there? We'd like to stay the night. Soon enough, someone called from inside. Coming, coming. A moment later, the door opened. Several attendants came forward to greet them, their faces full of smiles. Good sir. They initially meant to say good sir, but the person before them was wearing women's robes. They amended their statements. Miss? Before the word left their mouth, Xilian fully emerged from the darkness with Huacheng in hand. This wasn't an unmarried lady if there was a child, so they amended themselves again. Madam was still half on their lips when Julien's face became illuminated by the light within the inn. This guest was dressed in women's robes, but if I had to be honest, while his face was gentle in appearance, it was a man's face no matter how they looked. The attendants fell mute at once, and it was a good moment before they simply went back to their original greeting. Good sir, please come inside. Julien smiled as he nodded. He'd worn pretty much every type of clothing at some point, and felt not a drop of mental or physical discomfort. With Huacheng in hand, he crossed the extremely low threshold, and sat down at a table in the corner of the lobby. Other than the attendants, there was no one else at the inn. The moment they entered, the attendants had immediately closed the door and gathered around their table, smiles plastered on their faces. Smiles that were now making Julien rather uncomfortable. He took the menu card. It's not easy to find an inn like this in the middle of nowhere. Amazing. It's the truth, isn't that the truth? It's not easy to attract customers like you in the middle of nowhere either, the attendants responded. For some reason, while they were all smiling, the smiles looked painted on. Quite fake indeed. Julien didn't let his thoughts show. He looked over the menu and ordered a few dishes, and the attendants merely left to convey those orders to the kitchen. Huacheng toyed with his chopsticks. Guga, we're at a shabby establishment run by ghosts. Julien acknowledged. Out here in the middle of nowhere, even finding a small one-level inn with a few attendants would have been quite amazing. Why would there be such a lavish establishment with so many attendants if there wasn't something suspicious afoot? Of course, this wasn't strong evidence on its own. The real indicator was the fact that Julien had smelled the thick, fresh stench of blood from the moment he entered the inn. Ordinary folk probably wouldn't notice the smell, but someone with his sharp senses and considerable experience, it was so heavy it couldn't be ignored. There are more people on the second floor. I hear their footsteps, Julien said. I wonder if they're also travelers staying the night. If they were, then they must be rescued. The two sat across from each other and brought their faces close, talking in whispers for a long while. The attendants finally brought over their dishes. Coming! Julien was about to speak, but he sensed a slight movement from outside and rose to his feet. We're going to go rest in our rooms. Can I trouble you to bring our food upstairs? No problem, no problem. Julien took Huacheng's hand and lifted his skirt with his other hand, with practiced ease as they went upstairs. He looked back. Oh, by the way, if anyone asks, please tell them you've never seen us. No problem, no problem. Julien hurried up the stairs. It wasn't long before they heard someone banging brashly on the front doors in a gruff voice calling out, Open up! The attendants opened the door with smiles on their faces. The crowd that poured in was the relentless mob of monks and cultivators led by Heaven's Eye. By then, Julien and Huacheng had already entered their room on the second floor, and they shut the doors behind them. They could hear people who had just entered yelling, Toilet! 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 And running for the outhouse while the others demanded, Boss, you got water? The attendants were overjoyed at the sight of so many people coming in at the same time. We do. Please wait, it's coming. I'm so bloated, Heaven's Eye complained. Unbelievable. Those whatchamacallits, those incorruptible chastity pellets, really are a tenacious poison. I've only gotten 20-something cups. How long will it be before I reach 81? Julien was speechless. He hadn't imagined that those monks and cultivators would be so gullible. He told them to drink 81 cups of water, and so they really planned on drinking exactly 81 cups of water. Hamatava Buddha, I have already imbibed 25 cups of water, and I must say it has been very effective as an antidote, one of the monks declared. I'm feeling much better already. Hearing this, Julien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He fumbled around the room to see if there were any cracks he could peek through, until he heard Huacheng calling to him. The boy was half crouched on the floor along the wall. Guga, look over here. Julien crouched as well, and looked where he was pointing on the floor. But he didn't see anything unusual. What am I looking at? Huacheng suddenly poked the floor, and a small hole instantly appeared. A thin ray of light shone through. Here, now we can see. Julien leaned down and peeked through the hole. The mob was gathered at a long table in the middle of the lobby, and Heaven's Eye slapped its wooden surface. We were too careless this time. Next time we see that evil cultivator, we won't give him any chance to take advantage of us. We must take a Huachenzu and eradicate evil in the name of heaven. Sanlan, just how did you offend them? Julien whispered. Before Huacheng could answer, someone else had already asked in Julien's place. That's right. I never asked, but what brings all of you here to catch that ghost king? What's the story? With that, their condemnation meeting began. Just thinking about it brings fury to my heart. 20 years ago, there was a pig spirit who went crazy and uprooted the village master's household. The building collapsed and the whole family was killed, and the pig fled to Ghost City. I had only just entered the trade at the time. I chased after the creature, but I was beaten to a pulp by a bunch of ghosts. What humiliation. He also sent one of his lackeys to tell me that if you eat a whole family of pigs, it's only fair for a pig to slaughter your whole family in revenge. It's your lucky day if the pig doesn't seek revenge. If it does, then you deserve it. Now tell me, what is that rotten logic? What a coincidence. Our sect experienced something similar. but it was in regards to a rooster spirit. Our story's simple. The heavenly official we worshipped in our sect had his name on his hit list. So no matter how many temples we built, he always burned them down. What an outrage. Absolutely unreasonable. Hear, hear. You all know of my Shishong, right? He was talented and had an infinite future. He only had one tiny vice. He loved to dally with women. Decades ago, a prostitute ghost seduced my Shishong and sucked him dry, turned him into human jerky. That ghost king dared shelter her. The criticism was flaming down below, but above it, Huacheng looked bored out of his mind, not even bothering to give a taunting smirk. I think I've heard of your Shishong before, Heaven's Eye said. Wasn't he the guy who would force himself on married women under the pretense of conducting rituals and ceremonies? The one who got locked up for 3 months. The attendants brought their food over just then, and the crowd's attention was diverted. Food's here. Come. Let's say no more, Heaven's Eye Shong, let's eat. Shilian straightened up and squinted at the dishes the inn attendants brought over. Don't bother looking. They'll keel over the moment they eat that stuff, Huacheng said. This is going to be troublesome, Shilian murmured. While the mob of monks and cultivators was relentless and extremely annoying, Shilian couldn't just let them croak in this strange, shady establishment. But it would also be rather awkward for them to raise the alarm. Suddenly Heaven's Eye spoke up. Hold it! He stared at the dishes and blocked the others from digging in, his eyes sharp and flashing. He does have some skill, Shilian praised mentally. Heaven's Eye, Shung, what's wrong? The others wondered. Heaven's Eye reached out with one finger and whipped around the edge of the plate, then raised his finger high in the air. So much grease, and just from one wipe of a finger, he yelled in rage. These plates aren't clean. What kind of business are you guys running here? Shilian thought the man had noticed there was something off, but he hadn't imagined it was a different sort of off. He was rather surprised, but still, the result was the same. The moment Heaven's Eye complained, the others began to gripe as well. My gosh, it's true. What is this? It's all sticky like spit. Wait, there's hairs in this dish. Someone reached out with their chopsticks and stirred out a few strands of long black hair. Holy shit, what's going on with your kitchen? Who the hell's working in the back? The smiling attendants nervously rubbed their hands together. We recently butchered a few pigs, so those are probably pig hairs. But when the chopsticks pulled at those hairs to pull them from the dish, the hairs only seemed to grow longer and longer the more they pulled. What kind of pigs have hair this long? Is your boss lady washing her hair in the kitchen? Take all this away and redo it. Yes, sir. The attendants hurriedly acquiesced. We'll do everything right away. My lords, please drink water. Drink water. They shouldn't drink the water either, Shilian thought. There must be something in the cups as well. Just before the cups reached the mob's lips, and before the attendants could get away, Heaven's Eye called out again, Get back here! One of the attendants returned, smiling apologetically. Does my lord Daoshong need anything else? Let me ask you something. Have you seen a very strange woman lurking around, accompanied by a small child? Heaven's Eye asked. So he did inquire after all. Thank goodness I instructed them not to tell, Shilian thought. But as he was thinking this, the attendant responded without missing a beat. Oh, yes. Shilian was stunned. The mob was shocked, and they put down their water and hushed their voices. Where are they? The attendant also hushed his voice. Upstairs. The mob went on high alert, and their gazes flicking upwards. Shilian swiftly blocked the hole Huacheng had poked with his finger. A moment later, they heard the sound of a group of people creeping upstairs. Shilian skulked to the door, listening to the footsteps. It seemed that the attendant had led the mob to the second floor, and they were sneaking toward them. His left arm held Huacheng, and he clutched his sword in his right. Uruya stood next to them to serve as a shield. All weapons were at the ready, and Shilian was tense and wholly prepared to launch an attack. However, the footsteps passed by their room and continued down the long hallway. Puzzled, Shilian pressed against the door and looked out through the crack. The mob had passed them by and surrounded the entrance to another room. There seemed to be someone in that suite. Faint light flittered through, and the paper windows reflected the silhouette of a woman sitting at the table. He never would have imagined that the attendants would actually stick to their word and keep their pretense under wraps. But the attendant had been referring to another guest. It seemed there was another very strange woman accompanied by a small child who had come to this inn to lodge for the night. Heaven's Eye and his group shared a look. After miming a series of hand gestures to each other, the group prepared to kick the door down. Suddenly, the light inside the room was extinguished, and the silhouette disappeared. Following right after was a series of hurried footsteps. Thud, thud, thud. A woman yanked the door open, cussing. What are you stinking men doing, lurking outside my door in the middle of the night? Your grandma wants to take a bath, so what are y'all planning, huh? The lady's figure was slender and sensual, and her face was unpainted. Although she had the air of a fighting cock, she was nonetheless wholly a woman. She clicked her tongue, rolled up her sleeves, and continued to curse. And it's a bunch of monks and cultivators to boot! Aren't y'all men of the cloth? What happened to all your chastity vows? A few of the monks mumbled, It's a misunderstanding. The woman raised her brows impossibly high, then lifted her hands as if ready to strike. I don't care if it's a misunderstanding or a meeting. Leave now, or this grandma will grant y'all a nice tub of bath water. Hey, Lady Benefactor, how can you be like this? Consider your virtue. Let's get out of here. Shilian didn't recognize the woman's face. Her voice and the air about her was extremely familiar. A moment later, he gasped in shock. Luncheng? That's right, it's her, Huacheng confirmed. Seeing the crowd disperse, Luncheng seemed to let out a sigh of relief. She glanced around, then hurried back to her room, shutting the door behind her. She wasn't covered in heavy makeup for once, and showed the world a plain face. While there were quite a number of wrinkles around her eyes that made her age apparent, unexpectedly she was rather elegantly beautiful. Shilian almost didn't recognize her. If she had presented herself like this on the day at the Palace of Divine Might, Pei Ming's claim to innocence might not have been as convincing. During the first wave of tremors from Mount Tonglu's reopening, a significant number of ghosts and monsters used the chaos to escape imprisonment. Lancheng and the fetus spirit were among them. If the very strange woman the attendant referred to as Lancheng, then that meant the child was... The fetus spirit must be with her, Shilian whispered to Huacheng. That creature is too dangerous. We can't let them run loose like this. But the inn where they were staying was already seedy, and on top of that, there was that band of mortal religious masters in pursuit of Huacheng. It wasn't going to be easy for Shilian and Huacheng to escape Lancheng under the circumstances. To capture Lancheng under the circumstances. The crowd of monks and cultivators made it to the staircase, and the attendant said, How did it go? Was that not the person my lords were searching for? It was not, Heaven's Eye replied, then sighed heavily. Let me ask you this, then. Have you seen a cultivator with a small child? The attendant gave it some thought. There's no child, but there is a cultivator who is here by himself. Hearing this, the mob grew spirited again. Where is he? They asked in hushed voices. The attendant replied in a hushed voice as well. Over here. This time he pointed to a different room. The crowd exchanged glances once more, and yet again tiptoed after the attendant to where he indicated. When they were still a stone's throw away from the room's entrance, a sharp sound snapped through the air. A yellow talisman shot through the crack of the door, brushing past Heaven's Eye's cheeks before nailing itself to the wall behind him. Stunned, the crowd went to take a look and found the talisman halfway embedded into the wall. The wood had been split, like the sheet of paper was made of iron. The group was deeply shaken. Several of the mob's members were about to charge into the room, but Heaven's Eye stopped them. It's not him, but it's someone formidable. Don't be rash and start something. Then he gestured politely with an arm tucked behind him as he called out to the guest. Sorry to have disturbed you, skilled master. This is simply a misunderstanding. The one inside the room declined to respond, as expected of a skilled master. As the crowd backed away, someone asked, Diaoxiong, why did you say it's not him inside the room? Wasn't that scrap cultivator's hand just as powerful when he threw those hidden weapons? Scrap cultivator. Shilian had to really think about it before he realized the hidden weapons they referred to were his incorruptible chastity pellets. Well, all right. Of course it's not him, Heaven's Eye replied in a low voice. They both threw hidden weapons, but the one inside the room is slightly weaker in strength and skilled in that scrap cultivator. He hadn't yet finished his sentence before another 7 or 8 yellow talismen came shooting from behind them, nailing into the nearby doors and walls like a volley of arrows. The crowd fled downstairs in terror, and at great speed without another word. Seeing that everyone had left, Shilian stealthily opened the door, tugged a yellow talisman from the wall, and returned to his room. Huacheng pinched the yellow talisman with 2 fingers, then lightly tossed it away after taking only a cursory glance. Heaven's Eye's eye really isn't too bad. A layer of spiritual chi was plated on the yellow talisman's surface, which was why it was as sharp as a knife and as strong as iron when it shot out and nailed itself deeply into the wall. When Shilian hurled those meatballs, they flew forth with such terrifying might that it was like they were a barrage of iron pellets. But they were not enhanced by any sort of spiritual powers. It was by his own strength alone. After all, he had spent centuries without any spiritual power, and he had long since gotten accustomed to depending on only himself and his own skill in all matters. The reliance on spiritual powers, that was how Heaven's Eye judged the difference in strength. Just how many different kinds of people are gathered here? Shilian couldn't help but wonder. Why is there even a cultivator like that lodging here? Could he also be here to exorcise evil? It's understandable that those mortal monks and cultivators didn't notice anything, but it would be impossible for someone of his skill level not to sense anything weird about this place. Either way, now I absolutely can't let that mob discover that Sun Lung is here. If they raise their voices and that cultivator overhears, we might gain another pursuer, and he might not be as easy to deal with as the rest of them.